Hi, welcome everybody to Viewpoint on 96.3 FM WLCN or WLCNonline.com. If you do get to listen to part of the show and say, hey, I got to turn this off, I got to get to work, or something important comes up, you can always replay it on our YouTube channel afterwards. Before we get to our guest today, a little disclaimer, I guess you can say. Viewpoint is about bringing different ideas and thoughts and information to you, so you can make the best informative and educated guess, or not guess, I should say, decision on your part and go from there. And so that's what our guests are here for today. I guess you can say we're doing a follow-up from our November 15th interview we had with Logan County Action Group. If you don't follow them on Facebook, I highly recommend you do. They're very informative, very professional, and very fact-driven. There's no fluff and guss and guessing with them, and it's just very, like I said, informational, and I guess I keep saying educational, but it is. That's what it is. It's education. Our guest in the studio is George Menken, Sue Adams, Bobby Jackson. So welcome back to the Radio Ranch. So thank you for being here. And again, callers, call in at 217-648-5510 with any of your questions or concerns. Before we go into CO2, we've got some things to talk about here. First, Bobby, you got an update for our listeners with windmills here in Logan County.
Sure, yep. So just to kind of whoever hasn't seen the previous information, we had applied FOIA to get the decommissioning agreements for the four wind farms in the county back in November of 22, I think it was. And at that point, we had discovered that they'd lost the paperwork and on all four of them. And it took us about 13 months before we were able to get those recovered. They were finally able to get them recovered. That's a great thing. They brought back their old zoning administrator, I guess is the title, and he was able to find the paperwork. So they fulfilled my FOIA about 6 weeks ago or so, I think it was. And so that's a great thing. We've got both the application and the plans for all four wind farms. I confirmed that they were the ones the board approved, or the evidence is there of that. So I was able to do an audit on that. What we don't have are evidence that the financial letters of credit, and in one case it's a
it's not a bond, it's
a bond,
surety
bond. A surety bond for that. Yeah. So I put up a report. I'm going to the next general board meeting next week. I'll stand up during public comments and let them know my findings. But what we're working towards now is just making sure that they do have financial backing for all four of them. One of the findings that I found was rail splitter, the oldest of the four, is expired. They need to reassess the estimates for the decommissioning, and I believe the financial is expired on that one as well. So that's important for the board to know and follow up on. And then there's one of them that's due for reassessment this year, and then the other two, I believe, are due next year in 2025. So it's good for the county that we found the paperwork, and as long as they follow up on those last items, I think we'll be pretty good shape.
Wonderful.
And we're going to also offer some other suggestions to the county about what they can do moving forward to make these agreements stronger and protect our community a little better than they are today. So
I had somebody ask me, is there any other windmill projects projected for Logan County in the future?
Yep, there are two additional wind farms that have been approved. There's Top Hat, which is actually just directly south of here in my area. That's they're under construction right now. They haven't started any foundations for the turbines. They are starting to work on laydown yards and some other construction work. I think the turbines will probably commence construction sometime this summer is what their schedule is, as far as I know. The other one, I haven't heard anything about where they're at in terms of their progress, but I'm anticipating they're likely to start some type of construction this year as well.
Where's that one going?
Out on the, what township? Do you remember what township that one's?
Isn't that out by New Holland or something? No. No, I don't remember
It's
now.
out west. We could, I could find out.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's
so
fine.
I
What I can
apologize.
do is I can post, I'll submit to you and I'll post on Logan County Action the footprints for both of those.
Okay, great.
Just a reminder by where the towers are going to be placed and that sort of thing. So if you live in those, if you live in a township as I do, or some of these others, you at least you can look at the plot and figure out, do I have any kind of in my immediate area. And one last thing I'll mention on this, I've got a coworker that submitted a video of a turbine that's close to her home, and it is noticeably loud. They're definitely violating the sound ordinance on this particular wind turbine. And she said that she gets, I don't want to misspeak, but I think she's like 9 or 10 minutes out of the year, she gets shadow flicker from another one that's close to her home. So what I'm going to suggest to the county is that they provide some type of ordinance control over top of these wind farms to protect the community, because they say that their noise levels are supposed to be below federal standard or state level standards, but in practice that's not always the case. And who protects those landowners or those homeowners, right? The people living amongst these things. They call, like this person I work with, she calls the wind farm and she gets the answer, I'll look into it, right? Well, everybody kind of knows what I'll look into it means, right? So if the board is going to approve these things, then the board should be responsible to make sure that they stay in compliance.
Do they have much for the Logan County Board zoning ordinances or anything like that, or rules, regulations? Has the county made any progress that way, or do you for right now, or this is something they need to work on towards and holding companies accountable?
Well,
And-
I'll let George fill in the blanks here, but what I can say is that they have, so the wind farms go through the zoning board of appeals, because there is no clear zoning that covers wind farm projects and projects like that. So they go through an appeal process. During the appeal process, that's when the approval gets made for the application, and they go through the negotiations on every specific wind farm of what they can and can't do. So part of that is that they're supposed to follow what they call the AMA, which is a state template for minimum standards. Now, I don't want to go into the details of what's recently happened with that, but that's essentially what's happened with these older ones. And so at that point, they establish what are the guidelines for that wind farm for the community. Setbacks, noise control, what the decommissioning plan is going to look like, those types of things. Those can be improved in my mind. There's several things that the county can do to improve those agreements. Where I think the biggest gap is that even though that they say to stay in compliance, they have to be below a certain dBA level on noise, and shadow flickers 30 hours a year or less. Those types of things are written in the agreement. To my knowledge, there's no enforcement mechanism for that. So what happens when they don't hold to those standards? I don't know, George, are you familiar with any historical?
The standards are set by both the feds and the state. And the county board really goes by those. If they come in and say, here, we met the standards, then that's all they go by. So they don't build and haven't built in any enforcement procedure at all.
Is there any fine? So, let's say you get your driver's license, the speed limit is 55 miles an hour, and we break the law, we have to pay our fine and abide by so. So in that same aspect, I'm trying, kind of show it.
Yeah.
I know it's not apples to apples, but a small comparison here. Do they have to have, so if they don't abide by their agreement, then how are they held accountable? So,
Depends on the agreement. If the agreement is the AMA, that would be enforced by the state.
okay.
So
Could
your
be.
enforcement there would go through either the Attorney General or civil suit or something on that order. At the county level, they don't build in any requirements for the sound barriers or the flicker or anything. They just go by the state rules. So they, short of passing the ordinances, putting in the zoning, they don't have any ability to do anything. The most they could probably do would be the county board call the state and use political pressure to get them out to double check on it and how they would do it.
But nuisance issues like that are really hard to escalate to that point, right?
Right.
I mean, if you're living by one of these things and it's just screeching and and it's keeping you up at night. I mean, it's affecting your real life, right? I mean, your day-to-day life. It's a nuisance thing, even though it's extremely disturbing for the individual that's dealing with it, or the community that's dealing with it. Escalating that to somebody that can do something about it there's no real path for that I'm aware of.
That's what I was asking.
Right.
Is there,
and
a
that's
protocol?
And I think the county, I have to imagine the county has ways that they could put ordinances in place that are enforceable. Now, you talked about the financial, penalties and that sort of thing. The only financial penalties I've ever read in any of these agreements, and I've read many of them, is the one that we have written into our Top Hat wind farm, and that applies to the Doppler radar station. So, is it okay for describe it briefly?
Please go for it. Yes.
Okay. So the Top Hat wind farm, which is yet to be built, application's been approved, but they're building it this summer, as I said, has 60 turbines, and I think the number's 34 of them are placed within a 10-mile radius of the Doppler radar station out in Lincoln. And that 10-mile radius is what they call the mitigation zone. So there's 3 zones that protect the Doppler radar station. The inner zone, I don't know how far it is, but it's pretty tight, and that one they can't build anything above a certain elevation. It's restricted by FAA or whatever it is. But the 10-mile mitigation zone is a zone it's not I don't know that it's enforceable, but it's a recommended zoning area to prevent interference for the Doppler radar station. And they're not supposed to build tall structures in that zone because it affects the Doppler's ability to be able to read through that clutter. And we had one guy that retired from the Doppler radar station in Lincoln, had over 20 years experience, and a head meteorologist, and I don't remember what station he's with, but he's an active meteorologist, stood up during public comments and talked about not only their professional opinion about the hazards of placing those there, but also their experiences of having experience trying to communicate to the public severe weather conditions and not being able to do so, and losing tornadoes because of the interference of wind farms. And those weren't even as close as these are. Well, unfortunately, the board approved that wind farm, including the 34 in that zone, right? Well, their reason that they thought that they were okay to do that was that they've got a mitigation agreement between there's a mitigation agreement between the wind farm and the Doppler station. And if you read the mitigation agreement, it has no teeth in it. It's not really enforceable. It's not a practical agreement. You can't really enforce it. It's just something on paper for them to say that they came up with one. That's my opinion. But with that, there's a $5,000 fine if they don't. What they're supposed to do is, if there's inclement weather coming through, they've got a deadline of when they're supposed to turn the wind turbines off so that the Doppler station can do their work. If they don't do that, they fine them $5,000. Well, first of all, getting to the point where you can actually prove that they didn't do it within the agreement, communications happen, all that, it's almost impossible. The second part that's even more important, I think, is that they probably cost more to shut them down for that period than the $5,000 fine exists. So $5,000 to these groups is nothing. Leaving the turbines up, 34 of them running for an hour probably costs them more than $5,000. They probably gain more than $5,000. So there's no teeth in that. It was just, it was just a way for them to appease the public and to move the project forward. And I'll close with this, that one of the board members said it's ironic that the wind farms get fined for putting public safety at risk, and the county board gets the reward.
Yeah.
And it's true. So that's the best I can answer that question, I suspect. So.
No, I appreciate it. No, I do. So, you guys have anything else on wind farm updates? If not, we can go into CO2
I think that's probably
updates. So, like I said, folks, back on November 15th, if you want to go to our YouTube channel here for WLCN, you go to the playlist, you click on Viewpoint, and then you can scroll down, and you can see where we did talk and educate everybody about the issues and everything about CO2 and the pipeline, etc. So what we're going to do is kind of give you all an update to that and see where we are at. And I know some of us have been paying attention, Navigator and Wolf. So talk about their applications, Sue, if you want,
Okay.
and
Where we're at with
where
that.
we're at with that, yes.
The Navigator pipeline, which came through Illinois down through Springfield and Christian County in that area, that application was actually pulled from the ICC, and that project has actually been canceled. So at this point, that whole system is a no-go. One of the comments I've been hearing is that people that had signed lease agreements for the pipeline, those have been sold by Navigator to someone else, but we don't know who yet. So it'll be interesting to kind of hear what's going on with that. The Wolf pipeline, which was coming through Peoria, Pekin, down through Tazewell, Logan, and down into Decatur, the ICC had enough concerns about the application that Wolf decided to pull its application at the end of last year. And in January, the ICC approved them pulling their application. But Wolf said, well, we're wanting to pull it, address some of your concerns, and then we're going to reapply. So that is the status at this time. The application's been pulled, it's been approved to be pulled, and we're looking at them to come back. Wolf is still actively pursuing landowners and contracts, and I've had contact with people that have been contacted by Wolf in the last few weeks regarding contracts. And I don't know how legal that particularly is, since they don't have an active application.
Right.
Right. I know that Wolf had hired a third-party survey company out of Minnesota to come down and locate survey pins on section lines. And that was being done in January, and I think most of that was going on in January. The last thing that I'd heard was that, and this was discovered through a FOIA in Tazewell County by someone over there, the Tazewell County Board did pass a resolution to, I don't know if it was moratorium or to oppose, but they did one of the two. Well, apparently Wolf has contacted the county, and they are bringing in the seismic truck again and going to be going over the roads, checking the seismic for the substructure of the geology. So when they start doing that, then they're looking at geological storage for CO2. And that's what a lot of that is in regard to. And one of the things I've kind of found out is that in talking with other township road commissioners, these seismic trucks have been around in more townships than what I was aware of.
Here in Logan County.
In Logan County. And the whole county, pretty much the southern two-thirds of the state is above what's considered a good geological storage area for CO2. So I'm not surprised, and I would expect all of Logan County has probably been surveyed for seismic for the Mount Simon.
So speaking of surveys, as we all know, you can go survey your land, etc. But when they start surveying, I'm going to ask you, are they surveying and digging on roads, on county roads? Are they digging on, township roads? What are we seeing here in Logan County right now from Wolf, from their survey companies? What are they doing?
Some of what I've actually seen is there's been a dark red pickup truck that's been coming around, and there's two guys in it. They have a generator in the back, they have a jackhammer in the back, and they have a metal detector, and they've been their job is to go around and locate survey pins at section lines, and once they find it with a metal detector, they take a jackhammer to uncover it to make sure that the pin is actually there, and that's what they're
So they're tearing up
picking
our
up.
roads.
So they're it is a federal offense. It is a class 4 felony. And one of the questions we actually called the county highway commissioner, road commissioner, and asked about that. The county, Logan County, does not have any permit for surveying in roads and such like this. So they don't even, it's not something they even address.
So if they're digging holes, and we just got done with the freeze and the thaw, and now we have potholes. But to add to the potholes, now we're adding to them digging holes. So you're saying, are they reimbursing the county to come back and fill these holes in, or is it the expense of the county and the townships and the taxpayer dollars to pay for these repairs?
Right, and on the road where we live, we're on a county road.
Mm-hmm.
The county came by and patched it. So the
county ate that then.
The county does not necessarily know what's happening, and the county's paying for it, or the township's paying for it if it's a township road. So that's kind of what's happening right now.
So to be clear, as I'm understanding this, and for our listeners, Wolf have they contacted any of our road commissioners saying, hey, we're going out here and we're, surveying? Do we know any of that? Or have they contacted any county board members? Have they contacted, obviously, as you said, the county highway department? Have they made any contact and said, this is what we're doing?
I have not heard of Wolf having contacted any of the township or county people in regard to doing this kind of work.
George, have you heard of any such
I know
conversations?
in township here for Atlanta, they had not contacted the road commissioner, because I called him after I caught him on the road, and he didn't know that they were here. And it'll be the town, because it was a township road, it'll be the township's responsibility to fill the hole if they dig a hole. And when you say a hole, we're not, it could be 4 inches, it could be 4 feet. Because a metal detector only tells you there's a piece of metal there. It doesn't tell you what it is. It may tell you relatively how deep it is, depending on the quality of the metal detector. But if they're looking for a pin, there could be a beer can under the road that's going to show up as being a metal object that's at this depth. So they could dig a hole 4 feet wide trying to find
that pin.
Where it's a pin. Should it be enforced? Yeah. Now, I don't know whether the county sheriff's department would be the ones that would enforce the fact that they're doing that destruction, whether, criminal charges could be brought and enforced. Civil, I would think civil, at least the township should be able to go after them civilly for the repairs. The other problem I see is that it's not a very safe feeling when you're driving down the road and you've got a truck parked in the middle of the road and they're tearing up the road and you don't know who they are or what they're doing. And it's the road you got to drive on.
It's a private company,
And
destroying public property.
Well, they don't even have a sticker on the truck when I caught them. They don't have
No signage, no nothing,
No,
so you
nothing.
don't even know who it is there.
out of state license plate. So you don't have a clue who they are. And that's a problem. Without them reporting, it should be the county has to give them a permit at least. But without that, what you've got is strange trucks driving around, getting on private property at some point, which, right now they're, quote, in road, but nobody knows that they're out. What's stopping them from going on private property, running surveys and that? And again, I live out in the country. I'm not going to be real happy if I got people traipsing around my property. But, what you can do, the county should be able to do something. They could do it with statute. They could do it under zoning. You would think that there would be some criminal law on trespass. But the fact that they don't have to report, I mean, the state doesn't know they're there, the county doesn't know they're there, the township doesn't know they're there. Private citizen catches them, nothing a private citizen can do.
It almost to me sounds like the Wild West. Let's go out and,
Well,
in retrospect.
hopefully don't get to that point. But
But you know what I mean? I mean, we're out here, we're doing what we want, to heck with, your county and your citizens. And I mean, that's, to me, it's what it comes, like I said, this is Viewpoint, folks, so that's my view on that. But we do welcome callers. If you got any questions, call in 217-648-5510. If you've seen anybody out there, let us know. What have you found? What is Illinois Farm Bureau's stance on CO2 pipeline?
And Illinois Farm Bureau has recently changed their position on eminent domain. And that was one of the big concerns that we've had, those of us that are opposing the CO2 pipeline, is the eminent domain. When FutureGen came in with the federal government, it was written so that for the federal government to complete their project, they were given eminent domain. Well, when the federal government decided to give up on that project, they didn't do away with the eminent domain portion. Now that we're back into the CO2 again, eminent domain is still there. And Illinois Farm Bureau has now come out and indicated they oppose taking ground by eminent domain. And I think one of the catch early on was they were saying, well, this isn't necessarily a for-profit company. And they're now willing to say, yes, these are for-profit companies, and eminent domain, they should not be given the ability to take property by eminent domain. So that's a real benefit. I think that could go a long way to helping out.
Is there any other legislation there for Springfield for our lawmakers to look at?
There's more
as
coming
well?
out. There's one that recently came out, and was I had some of the new acts that are out there on the books. There's one out now that does address pipelines and also sequestration and eminent domain. And we think there's going to be good support because that's an Illinois Farm Bureau bill that's come out. The Coalition to Stop CO2 Pipelines has been working with legislators, and we think we have a good bill that's going to come out that has bipartisan support and will have good sponsorship, that should be coming out in a couple weeks, that has even more benefits to it. So things like right now, companies can come in and do sequestration contracts with individuals and no one knows about it. And I know some of the wording in that indicates that CO2 companies that are wanting to sequester have to give 30-day notice before they start doing that. And at least there's a benefit that you start to get word out that this is going to be happening. So a chance to make people aware of what's coming at them.
Mm-hmm. Now, we talked about in November about ADM, and they've been storing CO2. And from what I learned at the meeting last night that I was at in Gibson City, it's not a storage tank, folks. It is actually, they're just injecting it down into
a geological structure that has space for it.
Mm-hmm. But as you said too, they've been monitoring those wells there at ADM, and the plume underneath the ground there is spreading larger, correct?
Well, and one of the things that's interesting is once well number one was closed, that when they started, and here's the other thing too, is at ADM, the first well was put down fairly close to the bottom, the basement floor, between the Cambrian and Precambrian area. and they were getting some seismic activity. So when well number 1 was closed and they started well number 2, I think they raised well number 2 about 120 feet, so they weren't quite so down to the bottom of the Mount Simon Formation. They got less seismic activity, but it's been interesting that what's been injected with well number 2, that you're seeing well number 1 plume area move. So apparently the injection from well number 2 is affecting well number 1 in some aspect. Most of the wells that are being proposed now, their applications indicate they're going in all at the same level.
What is to stop? And I'm not picking on
Yeah.
ADM at all. I'm not, folks. So, I mean, this is common sense.
And they're the first experiments.
Right. So what is to stop well number 1, since it's lower than well number 2? What is to stop that plume from rising up and meeting up with well number 2 and then growing any further? I mean, really, there is no hard casing, is there, to stop these?
No,
growth?
and it's just open area, and that's how all this Mount Simon Formation would be filled. You put an injection well down into the formation, you pump into it, and when you've got the area kind of full, you have other injection wells that would be put in to help continue filling that Mount Simon Formation.
So, thinking, green, what can they do with CO2 in the long run? What are they wanting to do with CO2 other than storing it? Because that's, it's like a trickle-down effect from what we're understanding. Yes, we're taking it out of the atmosphere, but it's going to be causing a lot more detrimental effects than with, the original effect. So what can they do with CO2? What can they do? Do you know? I mean, what do they want to do with it at all and utilize it?
Well, some of the CO2 that's being stored, you have to determine, is it CO2 being stored for permanent storage, which is what currently is kind of being looked at, putting it down and not using it again for anything else. CO2 currently is used it's dry ice, it's used in fire extinguishers, it's in your soda, it used to be used more in propellants. It's not as much now. It used to be used as in slaughterhouses for euthanizing animals for processing, but there was some concern that it wasn't humane, so they quit doing that in some of them. So there's a lot of different uses. One of the situations I'm currently aware of is one of the CO2 companies has been up in the Livingston-McLean County area looking to buy up pore space. And I had a chance to see the contract. And in that contract, it's not putting CO2 down for permanent storage. It's being able to put it down and pull it back out. And when you start looking at that, then you're looking at one of the reasons for pulling some of this back out would be for enhanced oil recovery. So again,
so they're trying to reuse
continuing to promote CO2 occurring in our atmosphere. Currently, the oil industry, CO2 occurs naturally underground, and the oil companies use a lot of natural CO2 formations to get their CO2 from, for fracking, for enhanced oil recovery. This would be another way for the oil companies to have access to CO2 if the contract says we're going to put it down, but we may pull it back out.
The technology is there.
Yeah.
With these large pipelines that they're talking about coming through Illinois, is there any environmental statements saying, hey, this is really going to save? Is this really going to benefit or not? Or is this just minuscule and these are just companies looking for the almighty dollar to do this, and then in 30 years or so when they're done doing it, walk away and then saying, here you go to the state, see you later, we made our money, we're done and of use, and now you've got this mess.
Right. And a lot of, I don't know where current negotiations are on any of that. What's been done here in the last few months or so, what was being looked at is the CO2 companies were wanting to be responsible for during the injection period, and once they closed, they wanted to be done, and they wanted the state to take over. These companies are LLCs. LLCs can declare bankruptcy and leave. When the Denbury pipeline ruptured, about a year later, people were having long-term health effects. And they went back to the Denbury and asked for assistance financially. Denbury declared bankruptcy, and I believe ExxonMobil purchased them. And I don't know if the people that have ongoing medical issues are getting any assistance. So you've got those issues that come about long-term, and plus then long-term maintenance. Who's going to do, it's not just turning over the liability, but you have ongoing maintenance and monitoring that really should be done. And I think right now, US EPA only requires about 10 or 12 years of monitoring, and yet the Navigator application indicated it would be 12,000 years before this product became inert and didn't move. And there is currently a research paper out that shows that what we've learned from this underground storage, and CO2 is a buoyant product in the Mount Simon Formation. It can rise. And we've seen it globally in other locations where it has moved, and
I believe it was
Norway.
Norway
Had one where they were injecting.
Yeah.
And this doesn't always happen right away. It could be 10 years down the road or more before it moves, and you just hope it gets caught by another formation that's going to hold it. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's interesting in the One Earth application, they do indicate that the 3 injection wells that are going in will be in the footprint of the sole source aquifer area. They're not in the Mahomet, but they're in the recharge area for the Mahomet aquifer. And the CO2 that's going to be down there is close enough that it could be an issue if it starts to move, or if it starts to if it gets into the water supply. So it would have been nice if they could have placed them farther away from the Mahomet aquifer.
Right.
That would have been a good thing to have had it happen. Mm-hmm. And when One Earth submitted their information, they did indicate they had done some seismic study had been done, or research, to find out the Eau Claire capstone is what's going to keep the CO2 in place and not migrating up. There is a place in that Eau Claire capstone where a well has already been drilled down through about 2/3 or 3/4 of the capstone already. And they indicate it's in their application. They don't think it's a problem. So instead of having 400 feet or 500 feet of capstone, there is at least one area where there's only maybe 150 feet of capstone because a well has been drilled down. And if you get any ground movement, does that become an issue? Does that become a potential leak?
Now, you brought up liability. And at the meeting last night, you want to share with our listeners that there was a farmer that stood up, and what did she, I mean, because these are facts,
yes,
folks. The show is about facts. So do you want to share with our listeners?
She indicated she was talking with her insurance agent.
I know she had to have her note, because the bank sent her first and submitted a statement.
And she had a question about something else. Mm-hmm. And she thought, well, while I've got you on the line, let me ask you this question. If a CO2 pipeline comes through my immediate area where I'm at,
it comes through her ground.
What kind of insurance can she get, or what's her liability? And the response was, they drop her. She
And
has.
she said it's a top 3 insurance carrier in the nation.
Yes.
She said.
And I know we have seen other people that have actually asked and gotten a written reply that their insurance company will not cover them, and it's a well-known insurance company. We've asked our own insurance company. They have verbally said they would cover us. We've asked for it several times in writing. We've not received it. So it's
So here's another piece to the pie,
There's
to the
a lo-
puzzle.
there's a lot of taxpayer dollars being thrown out at stuff, but the liability is huge
Right.
to
And can-
taxpayers.
And can the farmer afford, or the landowner, and you just may have 2 acres. You may not be, let's say, a large farmer where you've got hundreds of acres. You may have got your dream, I want to call it hobby farm, or out in the country rural living setting, and you may have this going past you. So this is something that people really do need to pay attention and talk
Right.
to and find out everything.
And one of the things we've heard is we know of a number of people that have signed contracts that really wish they had not now. So
Is there a way for them to get out of those contracts at all?
not that I know of. Some of them right now are limited, that they're only good for 7 years if nothing's happened, although the company may have the ability to renegotiate them first. So there's some of that. It's right now we're really suggesting people don't sign anything. You've got time to learn about this. PHMSA hasn't come out with new rules or guidelines, so hold off on doing anything. Learn about what you're doing, the potential impact, what it could potentially cost you, what's it going to do to the value of your property. Some of these guidelines
And the liability issues.
and the liability. If you're around 1,025 feet away from a pipeline that's maybe 8-inch, you may have, if it ruptures, you may only have 15 minutes to get out. So there's a lot of things that really need to be considered before you sign anything, and we just really recommend you not sign anything yet. New guidelines need to be done, and know what you're signing, because people are saying, no, I wish I hadn't done that. Or the CO2 companies are saying, well, your neighbor so-and-so signed, so you can sign. And we've actually received a few phone calls from people asking if we had signed, and we've said no. And they've said, well, the company told me you had. And we said, no, we haven't, and we don't plan to. So they aren't being honest and upfront with you, so just please be careful about what you're doing.
The other thing that I was visiting with people with last night, farmers, they do have gas pipelines running through their field. And they mentioned to me after the meeting that they are seeing erosion many, many years. And they've contacted that company for that pipeline, and they said, it's on your property. You're doing something to the erosion, so you need to fix this. So, I guess this is another way of people kind of waking up going, okay, long term, if the pipeline does come through on their property, are they responsible for erosion, and what's the liability issues there? And maintenance issues, I guess you can say, not just liability, but the maintenance, because you've already got a gas company over by Gibson City who is telling farmers, and they said, no, we're not farming around it, we haven't touched it, because the pipe is not that far down. To who's to say? I mean, so people, are these being addressed by Wolf right now in our area in those contracts about erosion? I mean, what's in those contracts?
I've not seen anything regarding a pipeline. What I can tell you in regard to Logan County and a little bit into DeWitt, there are some gas pipelines, and pipelines tend to migrate up with time. Navigator was asked about this at a public meeting one time, and they seemed to say they didn't know anything about this. What happened in Logan County is there were some gas pipelines that ran along Route 10, and one of them was actually had migrated up enough that they brought in the company, they dug up the pipeline, rolled it out of the ditch that it was in, dug it deeper and rolled the pipeline back in and refilled it. That same pipeline, someone else is farming over it, but it's only about 17 inches down. And if they want to do any tillage, they have to contact the company. The company comes out and marks the pipeline, and then they can't do any tillage or anything over top the pipeline. So there's implications long-term as to how you have to work with it. Pipelines will migrate up.
And I mean, I'm not bad-mouthing Wolf, so if any of the Wolf representatives are listening to this, but, these are questions, because you do have some companies that do want to work with you, so, I'm just saying, has,
there's
Wolf addressed any of these other issues for long-term?
Yeah.
George, have you seen anything?
No, and it should be something that's in the legislation. You would think that the federal government would put it in as part of the legislation. And you were talking about who would be responsible on this. You got two aspects there. One is so you lease your ground, they put a CO2 pipeline in, and it erupts. Now, the company's going to tell you that they're going to cover you if that happens. But the company that's telling you that is an LLC that's not even in this country.
Right.
And so let's say they tell you, okay, here's your insurance policy, we'll renew it every year, don't worry about it, and you get eruption, somebody gets killed, accidents happen, and the farmer gets sued, and the company gets sued. And the company can disappear in days. The farmer can't disappear in days.
Right. And I will tell our listeners, I have been reaching out to Wolf. I want them on the show so we can ask them these questions. The company, like you said, technically their home base is Canada. And they do have an office listed on their website for Colorado. However, when I've done my research trying to reach out to them, it goes to like a call center ring general thing, and I'm not poking fun at that. I'm not, but I'm stating facts that it's kind of hard to get a hold of somebody because they're not
there.
They're not there in Colorado. They're throughout the U.S. Yes, and there is a woman here in Southern Illinois that works for Wolf, and I did finally reach out to her, and I told them, we do want you on the show. We do want to ask you these questions, because our listeners have been asking this. Everybody's been asking these questions, and to be fair to everybody, tell us what is going on. But like I said, I learned at the meeting last night, if that erosion happens, who's going to repair it or fix it, and are you going to get the blame for that erosion like this one farmer did? And they said, we've proven we've not farmed over it or around that. We've left a big enough swath, as you want to say, by those gas pipelines, so, and like I said, I'm not, saying every company is bad. That's not what I'm saying, but we need to find these facts out, so.
Well, and it should be something that's in the laws that they're required. I mean, I can see if it was my control, they'd be putting bonds up. They would be putting cash bonds up, not just for the repair of that pipeline if it floated up or eroded, but if it erupted, if there's a rupture. Why should a private homeowner take the risk for a company that can walk away?
Right.
And for a company that the private homeowner cannot say, you can't say, you've got to do it this way, or can I see the test to make sure your welds are good, or that your steel is good and meets standards. You've got no control. And
is there anything in the law that says their alarm system? So let's say there is a leak. Is there anything, it
Right.
says how many miles of shutoff is there, and I know they said in the application last night for One Earth of what their protocol was of if there was a leak, and there was nowhere, in fact, in their application, correct me if I'm wrong, Sue, with One Earth, that they're not notifying the company. It said, we're going to call the CEO, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. They didn't once come down and say, would they highlighted that? Now, they may change that, obviously.
I don't know if that's with One Earth. One Earth, actually, because the pipeline is short, will have more shut-off valves than most of them. What happened
But
was...
the alert system was what
the
they were talking
alert
about.
system, when you start looking at, that was during some of the navigator
Discussions, yeah.
discussions
That they
for
were gonna,
Wolf. But what was...
Navigator said that they were going to put monitoring stations in.
Right. One of them at one of the zoning board meetings, they actually, there's when your companies file for pipelines, that there's they line out a protocol for safety, and they have a list of contacts that they call or contact. And one of them was the U.S. EPA Region 5, and a phone number was listed there. And so during the zoning board meeting, they called that number. And this was 8 o'clock at night, and they got a recording for the...
It was the wrong number.
It was like the forest preserve system, and to call back in the morning. It was like, if this is a pipeline rupture, is that really what you want to be getting? So it just shows the issues in the system that really need to be addressed.
Right.
In Navigators, 'cause I went to the zoning board meetings with them for Logan County. They had shut-offs every 20 miles or 21 miles, and they were going to be monitored from northern Illinois, Rockford, or somewhere up in there would be their monitoring station for the pipeline going all the way down through here. And one of the questions that a friend of mine brought up was, how are you getting these communications? Is this hardwire? Is it satellite radio?
How are they communicating?
You're 300
period?
miles away, and you get a notice, pressure's dropped at here to here. Do you have to push a button manually to shut down to shut the flow off? And they said, well, we're still working on it. We're looking at maybe 3 different methods of communicating, and we're going to have, because they have to repressurize this. The farther it goes, pressure drops off. They're going to have pressure. It's not going to just be an underground pipe going straight. You're going to, every so many miles, you're going to have a repressurization station. You're
That keeps pushing
to keep the pressure up.
Keep the pressure up.
Right. The problem, and I brought this up, and I probably don't know, shouldn't make it public. So you're going to have a poisonous gas exposed to the air with pressurization stations every so many miles, running, in Navigator's case, 1,000 miles. And what kind of security have you got for it? What's your terrorist
Right, what's your terrorist? Yeah, what's your biosecurity?
Well, we're going to put a fence around it, was the answer. And that was from their attorney.
A fence.
Yeah. Now, so what you're saying is that you've got essentially 1,000-mile long, I don't know if I want to use the word, but a death house, that if somebody ruptured that 1,000 miles in multiple places, there's going to be a lot of people get killed because the CO2 is going to escape. But a fence is going to stop it, though. But this is all stuff that they're not telling the public this. They're not telling that, yeah, it'll kill you. No, it'll be underground, don't worry about it. They're not telling you
how they're going to maintain it, how they're going to properly handle things.
They're not planning on it. They're wanting, there's billions of dollars going into this. The Navigator's case, I asked them what the percentage of CO2, the worldwide percentage of CO2 that they were going to be putting in the ground. It was 1/100,000th of 1% per year. So that means you got to have, to catch up to the annual amount of it going into the air a year, you're going to have 100, well, more than that, 1 million plus of these things worldwide injecting this back in the ground. There's no possible way to do it.
Right.
All the CO2 projects pretty much so far the majority of them, have vastly underperformed. And some of them have been closed and shut down.
Yeah.
Well, the other problem I've got is, they're also spending money on grants for a lot of these scientists to come up with different ways to do this. And I just read an article about it. They can actually separate the carbon from the oxygen. And then the carbon becomes a reusable resource. The problem is the cost. But when you look at the cost of that versus the billions they're putting into this pipeline.
So that's been my key point all along. Why don't, instead of spending all the money on construction and et cetera, and leasing the land, put it back into the research and doing something with it right there instead of, coming through and tearing this all up and making it even, making it terribly bad for everybody. So.
And that's the other question is, you put in 1,000 miles of pipeline, how much of the trees and the other stuff that are taking CO2 out of the air are you disrupting? Mm-hmm. So you're really not gaining by the time you're done. And if you're only putting in 1/100,000th of 1%, but you're spending $1 billion to do it, what are you really gaining?
Right.
And if you can actually, and the government is putting money into research, but the amount that's going into it is nothing compared to what's going into these pipelines.
Right, and that's what I've been saying all along. Let's put the money into the research. Save that money, from the companies. Just put it over there to research.
Yeah, because
and that's what I thought. And I seriously thought that's what One Earth was doing over there until their application shows they've got a bigger pipe that they're going to be using, and they point blank said we would like to be a hub and tie into other CO2 companies. So,
Yeah, you have to wonder what the long-term outlook on some of this really is going to be. And one of my comments is, I think we're looking at this myopically in tunnel vision. We're not looking long-term and the broad impact of this. If you think you're going to solve the CO2 issue, what other issues are you going to create? Mm-hmm. Because Springfield Power and Light is looking at doing some carbon sequestration off of its coal-fired power plant. When you do that, there's a coal-fired power plant down in Louisiana that did this, and they found to do that, they used 30% of their power, and they increased their water consumption by 55% to do that. So, do we have the water supply to even do that when we get into the dirtier CO2? Once we get done with the ethanol CO2, power plants, fertilizer, your concrete, look at all the concrete in the world. I mean, if you sequester all the CO2, fine, but if you use up all the water, then what?
Right. Trickle-down effect.
Yeah.
Trickle-down effect. Well, George and Sue, I appreciate you guys coming out here to the Radio Ranch again, and Bobby here earlier with us. Thank you so much. Logan County Action Group, give them a call, ask questions, get your blinders off. We're not, preaching one thing, doing another thing. Just look and be resourceful and do your homework. And if you don't know, ask. We've got a lot of great resources out there. So again, thank you for tuning in to Viewpoint 96.3 FM. The Lord and weather willing, we'll be back next week.